Pastor Mike, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio, and it's a Mannin Line special today. The Chief Exec of Manx Care is with us, Teresa on Manx Radio. So if you want to get in touch, text, email, call and WhatsApp between now and 1. Pastor Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Andy.
Manx Care got a big plug yesterday with the petitioner, Simon Mann, with the petition for redress of grievance. He just says that funding for the health service falls far short of projected spends and ignores the impact of pay awards. Did you know anything about that petition?
Yes, Mr. Mann did let us know about that petition before he submitted it. Mr. Mann has regularly come to our board meetings. I think he's attended almost every single one of our public board meetings since Manx Care started. He has understood our board papers in huge depth, so he has been able to go through what we discuss in our financial papers. And yes, I was aware of the petition.
Reading between the lines, and Mr. Mann made the suggestion really that is the model for Manx Care, is it working? I mean, obviously it was set up by the Michaels report. A lot of money got spent on that. And Manx Care was set up to distance itself from the political arena. But constantly, the public gets the opinion Manx Care is playing catch-up all the time with funding.
Well, I think the Sir Jonathan Michaels report recommended a certain funding formula. And I think Manx Care's view is if that funding formula had prevailed, we would have received a lot of additional funding to what we currently receive. But actually, the whole world has changed. So this was pre-COVID, and the economic situation has changed. So the funding formula that was in the Sir Jonathan Michaels report has not translated through. We received, if we look at the last year, we received £14 million in additional funding into Manx Care, which on the face of it looks like a generous uplift. But actually, of that £14 million, £9 million automatically went on the pay award. So there was, and we saw an increase in drugs cost of 24%. So significant additional investment required almost just to stand still. And we have the same challenge this year in that we are already forecasting quite a substantial deficit, and we will need to take remedial action to mitigate that.
How do you present that to, do you have to present that to the politicians? Do you have to justify what's happening?
Absolutely, yes. So we are held to account by the Department of Health and Social Care. So on a monthly basis, we meet with them. We had a board-to-board with the DHSC earlier on in the week, and absolutely we will need to collectively look at what remedial action we can take to mitigate that. As I say, again, we asked for £58 million worth of cost pressures we identified and sought that additional funding for this year's budget. We received 20 million, which again, in that wider context of the economic picture, was a generous settlement, but against a £58 million cost pressure, that doesn't allow us to do an awful lot. So we're currently forecasting, as I say, £15 million of overspend. We have identified £10 million worth of savings in this year. But, for example, if we was to pay our staff the pay award of 6%, which is broadly what we've outturned in the last year, that will cost us £11 million. The inflation on drugs and consumables will cost a further £3 million. Inflation on contractual uplifts costs us £6 million. So you can see of that £20 million extra we've got this year, it really only deals with a pay award and inflation on costs and consumables and the contracts we hold.
COVID appears to have, and not just Manx Care, not just the Isle of Man, but COVID appears to have bent organisations and budgets and protocols completely out of shape. Will we get over, how long is it going to take us to get over what COVID did to us?
Gosh, I'm not sure. I think we are definitely seeing inflation and cost uplift in all of the areas, both pay and non-pay. So, for example, agency staffing, because they're in such high demand, the market rate for additional staff and specialist staff continues to rise. It is a real challenge. I think we are working on a comprehensive workforce plan, and we have had some success. But we still have a much higher vacancy factor than what we would like. The positive is that we have been able to get our nursing establishment up to the right level within Nobles Hospital by that sort of combined effect of overseas recruitment and that long-term commitment to increasing the number of pre-registration nurses trained on the island and increasing the bursary. And that will give us that sustainable position in the sort of 3 to 5 year plan. And we have had some success, but it is incredibly challenging, particularly in the financial climate.
I've had several questions, so I'll try and précis them and put them into one. This is Terry, who just says, could Teresa help clarify a query regarding a healthcare issue? We all understand the arguments for assisted dying, but I see that once in place, the vulnerable and the infirm and the elderly will feel an obligation to die. Nobody wants to be a burden on an expense. So what's stopping a distant family member trying to convince another family member to die because they may need inheritance or can't fund treatments? What will be the safety measures to stop this from happening? And I guess the overarching question is, this is from Ella, who just said, will Manx care play a part in the assisted dying procedure?
We absolutely will. We've had first sight of the bill. We have had an opportunity to give some comments and feedback. We don't exactly know how if the bill is approved, how it would be implemented, but absolutely Manx care would be part of that implementation plan.
And as we don't have that at the moment, presumably that will be another cost to department and another infrastructure.
It will be. So as with anything, so we're doing the same around the new mental capacity or the Capacity Act, looking at an implementation plan, looking at the resourcing it needs to implement it. It's not just within Manx care. The Capacity Act, for example, cross-cuts a number of government departments and services.
Howard, Faster Mike, good afternoon. Howard, you're live with Teresa Cope.
Good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, Teresa. They call you that. I'm sorry, I don't know if there's an echo. I'm in Chester Street car park at the present.
No, you sound fine, Howard. It's okay.
Is it? That's fine. Just a question for Teresa. My wife has been going away. I've got no complaints whatsoever. This is a complimentary call. Going away to Aintree for treatment for her eye. It's age-related macula. The service was excellent. Every aspect of the transfer and treatment was perfect. And we were supposed to go away, because I have to go with her, what are we now, May. And unfortunately, we both caught flu. So they cancelled the appointment. Again, no problem. But when the new appointment came, it was for June, and it was at Nobles Hospital for exactly the same treatment, the injection into the eye. And the service there was very, very good. And we found this was much easier because they haven't to rise at an ungodly hour in the morning to go down and get the 7 o'clock plane. And the treatment in at Aintree Hospital, very good, very quick, but it meant you were stuck in Liverpool then until 7 o'clock at night. Is the treatment for this particular, well, it's age-related macular degeneration, and is that going to continue in Nobles Hospital? Because, again, the service is very good. We went up for 9 o'clock and we were back home again on our own house for 10:30.
Thank you, Howard. Yes, the intention is for that service to continue at Nobles. as you say, we don't want to transfer anyone across to Liverpool for services if we can provide them at Nobles. And we have now been able to recruit the specialist staff in order to have that service continued on island. So hopefully all your future appointments will be able to be with us at Nobles Hospital.
Okay, Howard?
That's excellent. Yes, thank you very much. But as I say, the service all the way through the system, even through Crewcall House, the patient transferred, couldn't fault it. But it's just that it was convenience of being able to go up to Nobles Hospital and come back home, and she could relax at home then.
Okay, Howard, that's great.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling
Bye
today.
now.
Yeah, good to hear from you. We've had also reports of residents, Teresa Cope, residents being phoned up by people pretending to be from Clatterbridge Hospital and asking for personal details. Our caller hung up, called Clatterbridge directly, and the hospital says there must be some sort of scam going on. Are you aware of this?
I'm not aware. I will look into it though, Andy, because yeah, absolutely. No one should be giving their personal details over the phone, and we should always validate that.
So if anyone calls from a hospital pretending to impersonate anybody, hospitals don't do that?
No, they don't. No.
Okay, so that's just a general warning regarding scams. If you do get called, then by all means put the phone down and call them back directly. Here's a message in that just says, there's no provision for adult ADHD diagnosis via the NHS on the Isle of Man, and no prescription for medication. Could you ask Teresa to explain what the alternative shared care pathway proposed is to enable people who have stabilised on medication prescribed privately to themselves to secure subsequent prescriptions via their GP? If the medications on the list for available medication via the NHS, once a diagnosis has been reached privately, the subsequent prescription can then be available via the NHS or GP. This surely reduces any waiting lists once the provision for adult ADHD is in place.
Yep, so this is a piece of work we are doing across all of our clinicians to put in place a very clear pathway for adult ADHD. There's also that broader piece which affects a number of clinical conditions whereby potentially there is an opportunity to secure some of that care through private routes and some of it then transferred back into the NHS. It is very complicated, and I won't try and answer it all today, but a very clear pathway is about to be published on how that can happen. We recognise that because we are slightly further behind the NHS in terms of some of the NICE approved technologies and drugs, we need to keep that opportunity open for people who are prepared to self-fund some of that care.
Industry jargon, what does NICE mean?
It's National Institute for Clinical Excellence, so it's particular drugs or technologies that have been considered to be best in class, evidence-based, and that we should ideally be able to offer patients on the island. Again, DHSC and Manx Care have sought funding for this. It is definitely something we want to do, but it's something that was implemented in the NHS in the UK 22 years ago. So there is a piece of work for us to do to understand the totality of the cost of implementing NICE approved drugs on the island and how we implement it, given that we're playing a little bit of catch up on that.
Okay, Teresa Cope is live with us on Manx Radio, Chief Exec of Manx Care. We're on till 1. It's 20 past 12. Text, email, call and WhatsApp. And Julian's with us. Hi, Julian. You're live with Teresa Cope.
Hi, Andy, and hello, Teresa.
Hi, Julian.
Hi. Yesterday at Tynwald, there was a petition delivered regarding vaccine injuries, and I noticed that Manx Care indicated 2 months ago that it would investigate if there is a need for a vaccine injury service on the island. Has Manx Care made any progress in providing that service, and what mechanisms would you say would need to be implemented to carry that out?
Well, there is a sort of a yellow card system in place for people who have vaccine injuries, and obviously we're looking to expand the long COVID service to also look at how we respond to people who have been impacted adversely by having the vaccine. That service is, as you can imagine, oversubscribed, but it is something that we are committed to continue to do. you know, I think there's an awful lot of research starting to come through, and it does require some careful consideration, not just by Manx Care, but also by public health and DHSC as to how we respond to this.
Yeah. I know that there was some sort of a confusion between long COVID and vaccine injuries. And I think the way that it's normally separated in reality is if you catch something like long COVID, you have it goes in through your breathing mechanism, basically. So you end up with more antibodies present in somebody with long COVID, something called the mucosal compartment. It's all the antibodies that are different, that are all going in down your throat, in your nose. Whereas the vaccine injury one seems to be relegated to just those spike protein antibodies. So there seems to be a way to tell if the long COVID can be separated out from a vaccine injury because you're bypassing those antibodies that are in your esophagus, you might say, and it's going straight into your bloodstream. So will you be able to have any sort of a filter so that you can see if somebody seems to have more antibodies, which would indicate that they had a long COVID thing, or that more kind of narrow reaction to the vaccine?
I'm not sure I can answer that, Julian. I think that's probably more for the clinical experts who are advising us rather than myself, but possibly happy to pick that up offline with you. We do absolutely recognise that we need to continue to look at the service that we need to offer, both around long COVID for adults and children, but also the vaccine in injury. So it's something that we absolutely recognise is going to be required, and we're going to need to respond to.
Where do you stand on vaccine injury, Julian?
Yes, I mean, it does. When you look at the figures coming out of like Euromomo, which is the reporting agency for the whole of Europe, I think initially there was a bit of a problem with anaphylaxis. I think there were 2 people on the island who had it very early on in the first few days. And that's to do with the propylene glycol, which is this carrier fluid that they use which is the first time that's ever been used in an injectable. It's something that you normally find in laxatives and things. It's supposed to be an inert kind of fluid that helps to ingest. But latterly, there's been, obviously, in the press, you've seen that there's been longer term things like clots, blood clots and things like that, which seem to be, it's odd because what they're saying is it's sort of like a blood clot, but it's more like something called amyloidosis, which is something akin to plaques forming in the blood vessels. So I think it's probably important that there may be, a bit like vitamin D isn't tested and there's a lot of people deficient in it. The 2 tests that I think would probably be quite good to try and determine vaccine injuries moving forward would be, I think it's called an amyloidosis SSA test, and the other one is called the D-dimer, which is commonly used with people who've had operations to see how your clotting factors are. So there's a couple of tests that would probably be quite useful, that's well known within the NHS, that would probably be quite handy with people. Even if they've got no symptoms, it might be interesting to see what those measurements are, because like vitamin D, especially in the wintertime, people are walking around not knowing because it's not tested anymore except if you have a fracture and then you go for a DEXA scan and they test your vitamin D. But that's off the surveillance now in a standard blood test. So it might be interesting to maybe prevention's better than cure, and it may be that there's people walking around that might have a higher clotting factor than they really should, and it might be kind of handy to take something to sort of ameliorate those effects, maybe.
Okay. All right. That's great. Julia, thanks for calling.
Thanks, Andy.
Good to hear from you. Didn't everybody sign, Teresa, when everyone got jabbed, didn't we sign a waiver? When we signed the permission, what did that mean?
I think that's just a recognition that you were providing consent. I mean, as we know, the approval of the vaccines happened very, very quickly, and is all controlled by something called JVCI, which is that Joint Vaccination Committee, and we follow the UK guidance very closely. And I know there is a lot of research happening, a lot of looking at the literature, working out, what's current. And I think, the reality is we have to basically respond to the symptoms of the individuals presenting, and because it's not always possible to say what has been caused by vaccine injury. It's just more important to treat the patient in front of you. But there is a committee, a vaccine committee, which has got all of the professional advisors on it, looking at this on really closely and being able to give us a clear steer about how we deliver our vaccine programmes going forward.
The trouble is that there's a thin line and often a blurred line between anti-vaxxers and COVID deniers, and somebody who genuinely has reacted badly to the vaccine. And people have often, in the history of vaccines, some people have reacted badly to vaccines. COVID deniers use that term, vaccine injured. And could people who've genuinely reacted to a vaccine be put off seeking help over fear of being labelled anti-vaxxers, people who maybe agreed with the vaccine but had a reaction to it and didn't want to have, if you like, the stigma of being an anti-vaxxer or a COVID denier?
Yes, yeah, and obviously, the public health messaging has always been consistent, is the vaccine is the single biggest way of securing and preventing yourself getting seriously ill from COVID. So, the public health messaging is quite clear on that, but equally, there is a acknowledgement around that some people have had reactions to vaccines, and indeed some people have had serious reactions, and indeed there is a need to continue looking at the evidence base on this.
With Teresa Cope today, lots of things to talk about, including one about adult social care. We have in the last 6 months had a need to use adult social care and re-ablement teams, and wanted to say how fantastic they have been, but also Teresa spends a lot of time talking about nobles. I'll be honest with you, we're led by what comes in. So we're talking about this call, text or 992 says, can we talk about adult social care? The people who do sterling work. Could Teresa tell us when the new Glenside's going to be open, for instance?
Oh, goodness. I think the schedule is currently around October, November time. But we're working really closely with the builders, and it does keep slipping, but it is an amazing building, and I think it would be well worth any additional time it takes to get it completed.
We do talk a lot about health, and social care does take a back burner sometimes. So let's talk about adult social care.
I'd love to talk about adult social care. So we do talk about adult social care because we have talked here around the importance of the locality hubs, and you'll recall Claire Bader and Gary Lord coming on here and really giving those a plug. And we also gave them the opportunity to talk about what they do in the hubs at our annual public meeting earlier on in the week. What I would like to talk about today, which is a really positive development, is our multi-agency safeguarding hub, which is a new arrangement. It's a pilot, and I'd like to particularly single out two individuals who have led this. So Julie Gibney, who is one of our assistant directors in social care, and Superintendent Steve Maddox from Isle of Man Constabulary. They have worked together, and what this means is professionals who are involved in safeguarding are co-located and working jointly to share information. And to sort of enable a much clearer picture of any safeguarding risk to be identified, starting in the children's agenda, but we will move into the adult agenda. And I think this is a really positive. It's the first time we've had what we call a MASH, a multi-agency safeguarding hub on the island.
It is called MASH, isn't it?
It is called a MASH. It is called a MASH. All the different agencies contribute to the MASH. It allows us to really create a real clear picture, enable us to really plan care appropriately, know where to intervene. And I think it will be a really, really positive development for the island. It responds to some of the serious case reviews that we've had around adult services and in children's services. And I think, we started it last week. It's an absolute testament to the multi-agency working and the partnership that we enjoy with all of our partners, but particularly Isle of Man Constabulary.
Let's be honest, this is to help children and young people who could be subject to harm, subject to poor treatment.
Yeah.
And obviously those children and young people don't know the rules. They don't know what's happening around them often. So multi-agency safeguarding hub, MASH it is. The Chief Constable's well up for this, isn't he? Didn't he do something with this in the UK?
Yeah, he's very experienced and has worked with other MASHs where he's currently been, as have I from my time in Hull and in Nottingham. So it's not new, but we've taken the best learning from the UK systems and adapted that here. So we're excited. I think it signals a real change and a real strengthening of the partnership working.
So what wasn't there before that is there now? Why is it better than what was there before?
I think there's just a set of protocols which allows information to be shared. I think that just even the physical co-location of colleagues means that dialogue happens. It means that there are daily conferences around those safeguarding concerns that have come in, say, overnight or the previous day. All the agencies can sit round the table, share information appropriately under these protocols and agree a plan. I think it's much better than sort of trying to piece together something over 3, 4, 5 days, even longer. And that sort of clear protocols of what and when you share information, and as a result what actions are generated from that. So this will absolutely protect the most vulnerable people in our society. If
you want more information, by the way, the telephone number for MASH is 686179, or there's an email contact, childcare referrals, all one word, all lowercase, childcarereferrals.dhsc@gov.im if you want to find out more about MASH. I wonder if the following question could be put to Teresa Cope. Says Fiona, and she just says, in March 2023, a Freedom of Information Act response revealed that the ENT department within Nobles Hospital had more than 500 people waiting for an urgent appointment, 1,305 people waiting for a routine appointment. This is ENT, ear, nose and throat. I was just wondering what steps have been taken to reduce what seems a very long waiting list, and what are the current waiting times for a routine appointment when a patient's referred by their GP. And so some surgeries, there are real challenges, obviously, seeing a GP in the first place. So what's the situation in ENT, basically?
Yeah, so ENT is one of those very high volume specialties. Very high referral rates, and indeed a lot of people get discharged at first outpatient appointments. So very high volume in terms of the outpatient demand, less in terms of that conversion to surgery. We have 2 ENT surgeons on the island who work incredibly hard, but the waiting list has built up. We're now moving into that next phase of waiting list reduction. So we've started by clinically and administratively validating the ENT waiting list, and now we're starting to do extra sessions in ENT to try and address that. As I say, there are no easy fixes. We are looking at some of those wider service improvements around whether GPs with a special interest could assist. Different types of practitioner roles that could support the 2 consultants as part of that wider team, and perhaps specialty doctors who could also work in ENT. We have had an external review of ENT because we know it's such a high pressured and critical service for the island. And we have got an improvement plan in place. So things will begin to improve, and we are attempting to put more capacity into that service.
Dewan, you're live with Teresa Cope.
Hey, good afternoon, Andy. Afternoon, Teresa.
Hi, Dewan.
Hi. I don't know, can you give Andy something for that cough while you're up there?
It can go to one of our community pharmacies.
Keep telling to take more vitamins. You have a word for him when up there. We don't want to be losing him.
Anyway, that wasn't why you called.
It wasn't. It's going to get me off the subject. The petition of grievance that Julian messaged there that said about before. Normally, a petition of grievance goes in when someone can't get any reaction from something, or they're not getting proper answers. And I just wondered, is that the case with this? That these people are a little bit fraught that because they're not getting the proper answers for the problems that they've got?
Is this the one about what was it, long COVID?
The vaccinations, yeah. No, it wasn't about long COVID. I think it was about the vaccinations, isn't it? I think there seems to be a difference there. People seem to be putting it onto long COVID, where there seems to be a problem with the vaccinations. I mean, I'm looking at reports that Pfizer have had to release through the courts, and the correlation of myocarditis in younger people, heart weaknesses, and a massive amount of shingles, which has increased around all sorts of areas. And the correlation seems to be in the small print of the Pfizer vaccine, that was one of the side effects. So are we seeing a lot of that in the island?
I'm not sure we're seeing a lot of that, and again, that is the evidence that needs to be assessed by the experts. I guess just coming back to your original point, this is being taken seriously, and it is being addressed and considered through the various sort of committees and by the experts. But I guess, the reality is those people feel incredibly strongly, and some people have had real adverse impacts which they attribute to having the vaccine. So I would suggest we are doing something about it, but that doesn't negate the fact that some people perhaps think we should be doing more.
I think there seems to be a problem there with the coercion that was involved with the vaccination process in this. And a lot of people have felt that they had to take that. They were told they had to take that if they wanted to travel, if they wanted to see their loved ones. So there was a lot of coercion in this, and this story will go deep, and we could have a long conversation about this. So when we talk about COVID deniers, this goes a lot deeper than COVID deniers. I mean, as you said yourself there's a lot more facts coming out about this all the time. And I'm looking at Robert Kennedy's approach at the moment, who's standing for president in the United States this next time around, on the correlation again of autism into modern day vaccinations. So I think we have to remember that the vaccination process is a big business. Pharma is a big business. So it's just a question there. My original question was about the shingles, really. And like I say, it was noted in the Pfizer document. So it was just that was just a question I wanted to ask.
Okay. Have we seen more shingles around?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I would need to refer to clinical colleagues to be able to be absolutely sure about that. But no.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Juan.
Cheers, guys.
Good to hear from you. And if you are aware that there's more shingles around, but I've not heard of a big spike in shingles, but we'll see. And obviously this will all come out. So how far away is this the vaccine injury protocol and treatment and program?
I'm not sure exactly. It's probably a few weeks away. It is, as I say, it is ongoing in terms of that constant review of the evidence. But it's clearly a big topic. I mean, 2 callers already, and I'm not probably best placed. I think the public health professionals and some of the experts are probably much more informed to be able to answer some of those more detailed clinical questions.
Okay, John dropped a note in. He wants you to solve a world problem. Is there a timescale to bringing GPs to the Isle of Man back to the standard we had pre-COVID? It seems to be lacking owing to the fact that many are retiring and some aren't staying on. Unfortunately, when surgeries manage to obtain locums, they don't seem to stay, which is a great shame. And what can be put in place to keep the locums until we can recruit permanent GPs to the Isle of Man? And here is the big question. It appears there's a world shortage of GPs. Can you answer why?
Why? I think there is, yes, there is. There is certainly a shortage. And I think GPs have gone into different type of portfolio career arrangements. Certainly GPs who have chosen that route have done so, but not necessarily wanted to be a partner in a practice or hold a GP contract. They've wanted to have a much more of a sort of portfolio-based career and pursue special interests. I think ultimately the training numbers and the number of people being attracted into medicine and then choosing certain specialties, that has been a problem. That sort of entire workforce planning across the whole of the UK NHS just hasn't generated enough numbers for the demand coming forward, and that's and then obviously then there's that secondary bit about the number of individuals who choose to pursue general practice as a career, and it is a very competitive market, and the market rate for GPs and locums is exceedingly high, and they can obviously choose where they want to go, and some places have more budget available and can respond to those higher rates. I think we are still trying to attract GPs to the island, but also look at the different models around how primary care is delivered. So it's not just about GPs. Of course we need GPs and we need more GPs, but it's how the GP is supported by other clinical professionals. And we're working on something called primary care at scale. Now, as you know, we took on Balasala surgery a couple of months ago. And we've now got individuals called first contact physiotherapists working. And that started at the end of June in the Balasala practice. And that's going to be now rolled out into the Kensington Group practice in the near future. So these are qualified autonomous clinical practitioners who can assess, diagnose, treat and manage musculoskeletal problems and undifferentiated conditions where appropriate, see them independently, discharge them without needing to necessarily always refer them into a GP. They are autonomous practitioners. Right. And you can imagine the amount of musculoskeletal conditions that actually present in primary care. So this will really, really help, and we're building this capacity of other professionals.
Is that an extension of the old physiotherapy department that used to be next to Kensington Group practice?
Yes, but yes, these are individuals who are specially qualified physiotherapists with extended skills.
And how long do you anticipate Manx Care will be running the Balasala practice?
Well, we've committed to run it for sort of between 6 and 12 months and then see how that goes. We've now got a little bit of a hybrid model whereby we have some GPs who have their contract with us, and Balasala practice being the first practice actually run and managed by Manx Care. We always talk about the flexibility of having that salaried model. We have salaried GPs working within Manx Care who we can deploy. And this was one of the recommendations of Sir Jonathan Michael's original report. It is something that we will continue to look at, because actually as GPs retire, if new GPs coming through don't want to hold a contract, then we've got to be able to facilitate that. And that often means Manx Care being willing and able to run a practice and employ salaried GPs in order to deliver that clinical care. OK,
lots of questions to get to between now and 1. The Chief Exec of Manx Care, Teresa Cope, is here.
Are you concerned about your eye health? Holmes & Davidson Opticians in Douglas are proud to offer the Eidon Ultra-Wide Field Retinal Imaging and Heidelberg 4D OCT systems, state-of-the-art machines that allow early detection and management of eye diseases. Don't wait. Book your appointment today and ensure the health of your eyes with the best technology available. Call 676 230 or visit holmesanddavidsonopticians.co.uk now.
TGI Fridays, Harry Ramsden's, Greg's, Chiquito. They're each loved for food and enjoyment. And now they've all teamed up with Iceland to bring their famous food direct to you. Piccolino, My Protein and many more, all in one place. Shop right, so anytime you're craving for what makes them famous, we can help. No defrost, no prep, no waste. Straight from the freezer into the oven. And all at great prices. New exclusive brands. Only at ShopRite. Proudly locally owned.
Down at the Southern 100 races this year, why not pop into S&S Motors, your local EVF one-stop shop for fuel and so much more. S&S Motors, supporters of the Southern 100 races. 1, 2,
Come together for a night of pure Beatle nostalgia with the Bootleg Beatles. Journey through the swinging 60s with the world's most successful and longest running tribute, bringing the sounds and the atmosphere of the Beatles to life for one night only. Book now at villagaiety.com or on 600 555. The Bootleg Beatles, August 10th at the Villa Marina.
The Southern 100 returns next week, and Manx Radio will keep you right up to date with all the action around the Balound circuit. Throughout the week, you can join us for our dedicated Southern 100 service with full commentary of the practice and race sessions, archive commentaries, and some great music. We'll be on the air from Monday evening at 6 o'clock. You can listen on DAB, AM 1368, our digital channels, and around the course on 87.9 FM. Manx Radio 1368, the best biking station in the world, fueled by Ellen Vannin Fuels.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint
and Teresa Cope on Manx Radio. Lots of quick questions to get through. First of all, I missed, was there a mention of the private patients unit? When is it going to be up and running?
Yeah, we haven't got an exact date yet. We start doing private activity, private elective inpatient activity towards the end of this year, around Q3, October, November time. We've absolutely committed at this week's board to really accelerate the rollout of the private patient. We always committed to sort of try and stabilise the waiting lists as far as possible and stabilise staffing in the hospital as far as possible before we move to that next phase of opening up the private patient unit. We know it is absolutely needed, wanted, and we are keen to get this up and running. So certainly you will see it ramp up within the next 6 months.
There's a message in from Fred, who just said, are the nurses going on strike? What is the situation? We hear one thing from one side and one from the other.
Yes, so the Royal College of Nursing, which represents the majority of nurses in Manx care, have rejected the pay offer that we made to them. And they have now balloted their members and are going to take some form of industrial action. And we don't exactly know the detail of what that looks like. We've been in contingency planning and we work really closely with the RCN. But clearly they have to listen to their members. Their members have voted and are in favour of industrial action. So we're just working with the RCN to know what that looks like and then how we plan services accordingly.
Yeah, you've got mitigation plans
We have.
in place.
We've got plans in place. And as I say, we're just waiting for the RCN to say what does that industrial action look like. But we think it's going to be about 2 weeks' time.
Okay. G, this is, and again, it's maybe just a comment, but how can we compete with Australia, which offers medical professionals cheap homes, high wages and a better lifestyle? Is that true?
I think it probably does. I think if you looked at the UK evidence of just how many UK trained health and care professionals actually do go across to Australia and New Zealand because of those better salaries, better work-life balance, etc. Can we compete? I'm not sure, but we need to have a really good go at trying. We need to make sure our salaries are competitive. We need to be able to offer affordable housing. I do think we offer a good work-life balance and it is a beautiful place to live. But we've talked about sort of our recruitment challenges and things that we need to do differently here quite a bit on this show. But we are making inroads. We are having some success, but can we compete? It's a personal choice, isn't it? Some people want to come back. Some people want to go and have that experience for a few years and then come back. We're currently in discussions with a paramedic and nurse, husband and wife, who have trained in the UK. One of them is Manx. They've had some time in Australia, a good few years in Australia. They're now looking to come back. We're absolutely going to welcome them back.
And that's the issue, that medical training is transferable
across
the world.
It is.
It's one of the most transferable skills. A good nurse can get work in most places, most jurisdictions around the world. So that's a stick to beat you with, if you like. A note in now just says, can you confirm that the suspension of home births is because the head midwife didn't get a budget for staff required to run the service? Is it this or a pure staffing issue?
It's a pure staffing issue. It is a pure staffing issue. It isn't about budget in this case. It is about being able to recruit and retain and have sufficient qualified midwives. We've discussed it this morning actually in our risk committee. We have got some sort of progress on that, but not at the sustainable numbers in order to resume the home birthing service.
Okay, a note in says, my husband is due to have an iron transfusion. Is this a procedure that's done on the Isle of Man at Nobles? And iron, I don't even know what that is.
Yes, I believe it is.
It is done at Nobles. What is an iron transfusion?
It's a blood transfusion.
Okay, thanks for that. We're back with Teresa Cope in just a few moments' time on Manx Radio. We'll be looking also at the recent open day that they had at Vagabonds.
The Magazino's spectacular relocation sale has come to town. Marvel at the astonishing offers. Gasp in amazement at the death-defying discounts. The greatest relocation sale on earth will be appearing at Magazino in Wellington Street, Douglas, now, while stocks last. Those blessed with mechanical communication devices will find information on the Magazino Facebook page.
Excited about starting your new business but feel daunted by accounts, tax and VAT? Then talk to Nicola Bowker & Co. before you do anything else. From expert advice to getting a helping hand, Nicola Bowker & Co. can help and guide you. Call 861 271.
Every drop is precious. Water. So easy to take it for granted, isn't it? Our reservoirs supply the needs of our island, but with the effects of climate change, that's becoming more challenging every year. Manx water is the only water we have, so we need to make every drop count by using it wisely, at home, in the garden and in general. Visit manxutilities.im to find out how you can begin smarter living, to lower energy bills and reduce your impact on our island environment.
RS Promotions presents a night of disco fever with Boney M featuring Maisie Williams in the Royal Hall Villa Arena on Saturday 8th of July. Get your dancing shoes on for all the classic hits live, plus your 70s and 80s disco favourites from special guests Soul Kind of Wonderful and an after-show DJ. Book now at villagaiety.com or on 600 555. The legendary Boney M featuring Maisie Williams, supported by your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Island Games are back for 2023 and we'll be bringing you the action as Team Isle of Man look to battle for glory in Guernsey from this Saturday to the 14th of July. We'll be bringing coverage throughout the event, including news, interviews and videos, as well as our live Island Games blog to bring you results as and when they happen. Keep right up to date with the 2023 Island Games on air, online at the Manx Radio Sports Hub at manxradio.com and via the Manx Radio Sport Facebook page.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Teresa Cope is here, the boss of Manx Care. Just tell us about what was the open day all about at Vaggers?
So it was an opportunity to share with the public the full range of services that Manx Care offers. So all of our teams, displayed their service offer. And it was also an opportunity to talk about how we'd performed during the last year around our 4 strategic priorities. The work that we've done around CQC and Ofsted inspections, how we were working to improve the culture of the organisation. We obviously talk about finance and how we performed financially over the last year, and then how we were integrating services. So our keynote speakers this time were Ed Coates from our family and adoption services. So fostering and adoption was high up on our agenda this time, trying to really encourage foster parents and potential adopters to come and speak to us. The wellbeing hubs in the north of the island, and also our work with the Derby Community Initiative Partnership. And also we heard a lot about cancer care and the efforts that have been made to improve cancer care on island.
Pammy, just a note in, is it true that Manx Care's annual running costs £250 million? Is that right?
No, it's 317.
317 million, and as nothing ever goes down in price, presumably that's going to go up.
It will, yes.
So the question, obviously, just bearing in mind what Simon Mann said yesterday at Tynwald Day, are you fighting a rearguard action regarding this? I mean, is the political side of this, are they in tune with what Manx Care needs?
I think they are in tune. I think we've all got an incredibly difficult job to balance the demands and the expectations around healthcare provision, and just the range of treatments that are available, and the real cost of healthcare in terms of staff and consumables, against that wider economic picture. You know, my job as the accountable officer of Manx Care is to make sure we are using our money as wisely as we can, and prioritising the right things in conjunction with our clinicians and in consultation with our stakeholders, you know, our patients and service users, but then also make sure that our demands and the difficult decisions we're going to have to make are understood by the Department of Health and Social Care, by politicians, and the Treasury. And we make that case. So we'll be submitting our request for funding on the 4th of August.
Okay. All right. Thanks for being with us today. Good to hear from you. Back before Christmas, hopefully. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones.
WINT.
Discover a fabulous range of watches, gifts and jewellery at Ramsey Art Gallery with top brand watches from